Hello, everyone. My name is Monica, and I am part of the marketing team here at Enterprise DB. I will be your host for today's webinar. I am joined by Rob Pogmore, Senior Sales Engineer here at EDB. Before we start, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded. We will be sharing the recording along with the slides after the broadcast. The lines are currently muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit in the questions panel. Today's session is scheduled for 1 hour. We expect the presentation to last most of our time today and will allot any extra time for Q&A. If we do not have time to address all questions, we will follow up afterwards with any attendee whose questions was not answered. And without any further ado, Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Monica, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar today. The key takeaways I want to provide you in today's webinar really cover the following topics. So we aim to cover the four main use cases that EDB see with our customers today when using Postgres. And these are typically new application development, existing application modernization, replatforming and moving workloads to the cloud, and finally, legacy database migration, usually involving Oracle database. We're going to discuss how to accelerate your time to market by utilizing Postgres on modern development architectures such as Kubernetes. We'll cover building applications faster, enabling enterprises to be more competitive and disruptive in the market, enabling innovation of new products and tooling. Many companies are looking to develop on open source and typically Postgres to enable them to remain competitive in the market by offering their software solutions on cheaper database backends compared to legacy offerings. These days, there is increasing demand and expectation from clients for this offering. So we can talk to why and how developers can utilize Postgres to enable this. We also look to how Postgres can help enterprises see quicker time to value with regard to return on investment and in supporting an agile approach to application development. So the agenda today, we'll discuss why Postgres, what makes Postgres, or why is Postgres the best choice for supporting the modern database workload. We'll take a look at how and where you can deploy Postgres, the flexibility of choice, and the freedom you have to deploy the database. We'll then talk in more detail about exactly how Postgres can be used to modernize existing applications, using the database features, and how its multi-model architecture can support traditional structured and also non-structured or NoSQL database workloads. And this is an interesting topic, as some may be unaware that Postgres can do NoSQL workloads too, as well as the traditional transactional workloads. And often overlook this functionality that they could be taken advantage of at no extra cost. We'll also talk to the topic of database security, the benefits of open source database and what's provided in the open source, as well as what EDB provide on top in the form of enhancements in this area. We'll then have a summary of the various EDB related cloud offerings, which is useful to know if you're thinking about replatforming or moving database workloads to the cloud, and where you can get support from EDB. Finally, we'll do a brief overview of legacy migration capability that's available to you from EDB. So EDB supercharges Postgres. Now, what do we mean by this? EDB are the largest dedicated provider of open source PostgreSQL-based software, services and support globally. And this has recently been confirmed by the recent Second Quadrant acquisition, who were our largest competitor and the second largest dedicated company in the market at the time. We were founded in 2004 and now have over 5,000 customers globally, and 1 in 4 of those being in the Fortune 500. We have over 500 employees in offices worldwide, which help us give quality global support to our customers. EDB are privately held and are recognized as a leader in the relational database management systems, Magic Quadrant by Gartner and also by Forrester analysts. We've got over 10 years of consecutive quarterly subscription growth, and we are a major PostgreSQL community leader. So why choose Postgres as your database technology? This falls into 3 key areas. Firstly, the diversity of use cases. We did a survey of our customers recently, just to find out how and why people are using Postgres. The use cases, as explained earlier, typically fall into these categories. Firstly, migration from legacy systems, moving away from expensive incumbent database technologies to a more agile, open source strategic platform. Secondly, we've got new application development. So building new applications, utilizing open source, enabling quicker time to market, better value going forward, and being ultimately more disruptive, more competitive in terms of offerings. And finally, we have replatforming to cloud and containers. So typically when companies are looking at replatforming their database or moving workloads to the cloud, database consideration is also part of the commodity or more flexible deployment offering or OpEx offering that is provided by cloud vendors. So a consideration of moving not only the workload to the cloud, but also the platform of the database is also taken into consideration. The diversity of workload is an interesting one. Like I said, we did a survey internally of our customers, and we suspected the majority of them to be using Postgres for system of record. You know, it's a traditional relational database, so that would in theory fall into the category that most of our customers would be using it for. But we're actually pleasantly surprised to find out that only about a third of our customers were using it for that exact purpose. The other third were using it for a system of analysis. So this is more akin to business intelligence, reporting systems, some data warehousing, and the final third using it for system engagement. So this is backing up web applications, Internet of Things applications, that sort of deployment. So it's really interesting to see that even though Postgres is traditionally a transactional database, it's meeting the needs across industry for a broad range of workloads and use cases. And finally, the diversity of deployments. The fact is, Postgres is a pretty much an agnostic database in terms of where you deploy it. It can run on any platform or infrastructure. And the great thing about Postgres being open source and obviously the licensing model that EDB provide is that it doesn't hold you back from wanting to deploy or put workloads in particular environments. For example, you don't get penalized for installing on a virtual machine infrastructure. You can run Postgres in containers for microservices, and you can run it effectively on any cloud platform, either through infrastructure as a service, or if you want to use database as a service from certain vendors who provide that with Postgres. Okay, so why do developers choose Postgres as a technology? Postgres is highly extensible, and what I mean by this is that you can do many changes to it. As it's open source, you can build functions, packages, you can build extensions to basically customize and add to the Postgres functionality that is provided by the community. So you can always add and contribute to that. So again, this is a great thing that developers like about it, because they can take advantage of improvements that have been made in the community, contribute themselves to that. So it's really adaptive in terms of a database technology. It's also supported across popular languages and frameworks and platforms. So again, it fits in well with what developers are using in terms of picking a database technology to use. It's also built for speed. So again, the footprint of the database is relatively small in terms of comparing it with other database technologies. So that makes it agile and easy to deploy on different platforms such as Kubernetes. It also works with your data sources. So again, we talked about the multi-model nature of the database. You can connect Postgres to different data sources such as NoSQL databases, flat file, other relational databases, and so on. And you can use it to interact and share data between different data sources. So again, this all aids developers in choosing a database that can be both flexible, agile, and quick to deploy. Okay, so why do enterprises choose EDB to help them when they're working with Postgres? So EDB build key features of PostgreSQL core technology. Some examples include parallel query, just-in-time compilation, partitioning, and many others. EDB work with and help drive community Postgres on their major projects. So core technologies that go into the Postgres community products, EDB are driving and helping lead many of those technological advances. And these affect the overall direction of what Postgres takes as a database technology. For developers, EDB build in many support languages and frameworks to help developers do more with Postgres. And we're continually working as a company to try and make working with Postgres a lot easier for developers and DBAs alike. So one of our key objectives as a company going forward is to essentially help with automation, help with deployment, and help basically do basic things with the database much easier. EDB provide enterprise Postgres, and this means that our offerings are supported by enterprise class tooling that provide typical requirements for enterprise. Things like backup, monitoring, high availability, automatic failover. All of these products that EDB supply are product managed and built with the enterprise in mind, designed to run and support mission critical applications. Finally, EDB support the deployment of Postgres on virtually any platform and cloud provider, giving you peace of mind when deciding on a platform for deployment and support with flexible deployment models that you may have. And we can also help you with this with regard to automation and orchestration of deployment. So why do developers choose EDB for Postgres? We've already heard about why Postgres is great for developers, but why EDB? Well, on top of what Postgres already provides as a database, EDB add additional functionality to that. Many of these features and functions we've added have come from requests made by enterprises who have looked to move away from Oracle, for example, that we've helped migrate away from Oracle. So we've built in extra features that they're used to working within Oracle directly into EDB Postgres. We also add additional features outside of the Oracle functionality, things to help with multi-tenancy, additional security, which we'll come on to later, additional performance features, and basically features that are designed to help with dealing with larger workloads and typically more enterprise class systems. EDB Postgres also help developers and people work with commonly used frameworks. So we provide a variety of connectors or drivers to help connect the applications that you're using or developing with to the database. So this includes things like Java, JDBC, ODBC driver, .NET, and we also have an Oracle call interface equivalent called OCL, which essentially you could swap out with the existing OCI driver and connect Oracle applications directly to the database without having to make any changes to the application. And finally, Oracle database compatibility. So this is another key reason for why people choose EDB. Roughly a third of the business at EDB is Oracle migrations. So our Oracle compatibility layer helps with the migration process and helps customers efficiently and de-risk the migration, moving their workloads off Oracle onto an open source or Postgres-based platform. So let's take a quick look at a case study focused around new application development. So EDB have worked with KT Corporation, and they had a couple of initiatives that they were looking to achieve. Firstly, one of which was reducing their overall database and IT costs, and also they wanted to develop new applications for long-term evolution, LTE, and IoT applications and services. So how EDB could help this particular client? The migration from Oracle to help them reduce their IT costs was a massive bonus for these guys. Also, improving performance. So using the Postgres technology that we're putting in place and making the systems perform better and more performant than what they were expecting or previously experienced was also another benefit. And we also help them accelerate the development of the new applications, taking advantage of that open source technology and the support EDB could give them in terms of using Postgres and deploying applications on them. So ultimately, the business benefited by the fact that they could build their applications and reduce costs. So with software costs here mentioned by this company, saved up to 80% using open source database and other technologies, including EDB, and they were able to release their new applications as intended. Okay, so let's talk to agile IT infrastructure and being able to deploy on multiple platforms. So what does EDB bring to the table when we speak to cloud deployment and platform agility? Well, firstly, we have a focus on multi-cloud strategy, meaning developing and supporting customers who choose to deploy across multiple cloud provider, either on-premise or a mix of hybrid cloud model. And this is supported by both the flexible licensing model that Postgres and the EDB has, as well as our broad platform support for installing Postgres. So we have a variety of services offered by EDB. Firstly, we have a remote or a cloud DBA service, which is designed to be utilized by customers if they do not have staff sufficiently trained or do not wish to have staff DBAing the databases. This can be outsourced to EDB, and we can proactively monitor, upgrade DBA database services that the client has installed in the cloud. We can also help fast track deployments of databases by setting up things like database as a service. Some companies have done this already. Some cloud vendors have done this already. Two examples of cloud vendor who have actually used EDB's advanced server to create database as a service include Alibaba Cloud and IBM Cloud, who can fully support and deploy EDB product and tooling in their cloud infrastructure as a service. EDB also provide various orchestration tools, and these are designed to help you deploy, scale out, and automate the workloads that you want to create on your environment. So typically we look at things like Kubernetes, also deployment on virtual machine, also in the cloud. So one example is we have a Red Hat certified operator for Kubernetes deployments. We also provide as a company deployment scripts. So these are typically written in Ansible or Vagrant to help you and your engineers build a fully enterprise ready environment with backup, monitoring, and high availability in place. Finally, EDB support the deployment of Postgres on virtually any platform and cloud provider. So you've got peace of mind where you deploy. EDB are also deploying and developing a unified CLI, so a command line interface for all the development tools, enterprise tools, the database software itself, to help it make it easier for DevOps teams to both work with and improve integration and automation with Postgres and its tooling. So this helps adhere to an agile methodology in terms of deployment and how you want to work. So this is something that we're currently working on and hope to be releasing next year. So let's look in a bit more detail around our orchestration deployment capabilities. As I've mentioned, we've got the Red Hat operator, Kubernetes operator. So this is allowing you to manage and deploy enterprise Postgres database with backup, monitoring, high availability, and scale out. So when we think about traditionally how long this process would take to build an enterprise-ready mission-critical environment, thinking if this was done on bare metal machine or even virtualized technology, and then compare with how quickly, often within minutes, we can deploy an equivalent environment in a Kubernetes-based platform. It really is a night and day difference in terms of speed. You typically be looking at hours or days on virtualization, whereas Kubernetes, we're talking minutes to stand up the equivalent environment. So again, this is perfect for supporting your DevOps teams and their agile development requirements, and ultimately helping speed up your time to market by making it easier to build and develop your applications. As we've mentioned before, Postgres is an agnostic database platform in the respect that you can install in virtually any cloud environment. Therefore, you're not limited in terms of cloud provider, whether you choose public, private, hybrid, or on-prem mix, you're fully supported. So with regard to the automation scripts that I've mentioned, we provide free to use and downloadable automation scripts that are hosted on EDB's GitHub repository. These support deployments for various cloud and virtualization platforms, such as Microsoft Azure, AWS, VMware. They're written in a variety of languages to help you with your deployments, typically Ansible or Vagrant. And they're designed to help both the novice and the experienced alike by helping simplify the process of automating deployments of Postgres and the enterprise tools we provide, making it as straightforward as possible. These scripts can be downloaded and customized to meet your own specific needs. So again, that's something you can look at if you're looking to deploy an automated cluster of Postgres with enterprise tooling. So let's talk about Kubernetes briefly and the benefits it provides as an environment for deploying applications and specifically databases, as well as as well as some of the considerations you may need to address in adopting such a technology. Essentially, Kubernetes enables you to manage and orchestrate the deployment of software on infrastructure more efficiently. So the benefits we see with regard to Postgres include automated scalability, which means you can increase the database resource and the number of replicas to help with workloads when needed, and obviously decrease them when they're not needed, providing high availability, quick automatic failover, as well as the ability to both back up and monitor your data. Kubernetes helps make the process of deployment very straightforward once configured, meaning that you can stand up environments, whether that be development, UAT, pre-production, or mission-critical production environments for a variety of use cases. So whether that be to support quick development and testing life cycles, or creating production clusters to deploy for new applications. Another benefit of Kubernetes is the ease of use and portability of being able to move containers to different hosts or clusters and being able to automate this process. Meaning the software can orchestrate the deployment of workloads efficiently, leaving your staff to focus on other important jobs. It can also mean that your environment can do more with less. You can make more efficient use of the hardware you have available, or be more performant because there's less overheads or layers in between the database software and the hardware that you're using or the infrastructure you're using. Especially when we compare that to an existing technology stack that you may have in place. So typically the biggest challenges when moving to something like Kubernetes are the mindset of moving away from technologies that have been known to work and have been used for years. You know, why move away from something that works, the way we've always worked as a company, it's worked fine. You know, you don't want to be afraid of moving away from technologies that have got you to this point, because there's so many more benefits that you can have using Kubernetes. So we're going from a transition from mutable to immutable infrastructure. So traditionally from Linux servers managed and deployed via things like Puppets to immutable application containers managed by Kubernetes. So there's no more updating via yum command. An update now is simply a replacement of the container image. So again, there's different ways of working and more efficient ways of working. So with regard to EDB's cloud native approach and how we try to meet these needs, you know, our development is designed to support lean and agile methodologies and help to enable a DevOps culture within the organization. So we have immutable application containers. These are orchestrated by Kubernetes, ultimately enabling you to work more efficiently, driving you towards a quicker time to market. This is an overview of what EDB has as an initial offering for our container deployment. So we provided support for both EDB Advanced Server, EPAS 11, as well as PostgreSQL Community 11 on the OpenShift platform. And this is where we got our Red Hat certification. So with regard to capabilities, high availability out of the box using Postgres stream replication, full backup and recovery with backup tools to meet the following use cases. So developer enablement for unit testing, for doing POCs, for applications that require 99.9 or less availability, and generally to support a microservices architecture. With the ultimate goal of making EDB Postgres to be easy to deploy and easy to stand up a highly available mission critical architecture. So these were the initial capabilities from our container offering. So the Red Hat certification, vertical scaling with regard to compute and memory, horizontal scaling with regard to the number of replicas or standbys you can add to the configuration, the configuration for PostgreSQL.conf. So this, the configuration parameter file of the database, being able to edit parameters to customize your deployment to suit your database workloads. Monitoring, so again, you've got the runtime characteristics of your deployment and the database, as well as failover management in the event of the need for automatic failure and handling that failure if a problem arises. So a good case study we can talk to in regard to this technology We've worked with a large bank in Southeast Asia who traditionally have a large Oracle estate when running their Finacle application on Oracle, and basically re-architected using EDB containers to run this core banking application with EDB. As of last year, back end of last year, they'd migrated up to 500 cores of their application from Oracle to an EDB container platform, with the ultimate goal of migrating as many of the applications across to Postgres as they could. So again, they've not only migrated or moved away from an incumbent legacy database, but they've also taken advantage of the benefits that are provided by Kubernetes and container or microservices technology. And ultimately they're saving lots of money and making their general day-to-day usage with this technology a lot more efficient. So moving on to application modernization. Right, so this diagram indicates essentially what you could do with Postgres in terms of the modern database infrastructure that you may have at your enterprise. We've got lots of different database technologies and use cases on this slide, starting from legacy systems. So you may have the existing big database vendors such as Oracle SQL Server providing you ERP and CRM type of systems, data warehouse applications that's doing specific data warehouse loads, for example, like Ring, Plum, Teradata. And then you may have some big data deployments in place to perform and maintain those workloads, as well as event data capture technologies, and Mongo and NoSQL, for example, are what we're talking to here. But what's great about Postgres is the fact that it's multi-model, and you can use it to do things like data federation or creating a data lake because of the flexibility of the data and workloads Postgres can work with. So in the middle, we've got some of the key workloads listed. So transactional SQL workloads, we've got key value store, JSON, geospatial. These are all technologies that are built into Postgres as standard open source features. We can also integrate using our connectors or data adapters to different data sources. And these could be databases, as described here, or it could be things like flat file CSV. So again, rather than having your data siloed in different areas, you've got the ability to link all this data together, read from different locations, also write some of these locations. And EDB specifically support connectors for Hadoop, MongoDB, and MySQL. And we also have the compatibility in terms of replicating data from Oracle and SQL Server if you have a requirement, perhaps to offload some data from those databases into an open source Postgres-based database. So again, this multi-model architecture lends itself very well in terms of being able to utilize a broader range of the infrastructure you have in place without replacing or necessarily throwing everything out that you have. So you can introduce Postgres and start using the database without disrupting what you already have in place. So when we talk of ease of development and why developers like Postgres, as we've mentioned before, we cater for many different programming languages and integrated developer environments. As it's an extensible database, this means that there are many companies and individuals who are contributing to Postgres community, building new tools and objects that people can take advantage of. And developers find this great because, like I said, they can either contribute themselves, they can take advantage of what people have already built and work with extra functionality that maybe wasn't available to them before. It's developer friendly as well. So Postgres has been written and built and adheres to standards. So again, it's designed to help developers work with it. And it's also very good for providing or provisioning rapid provision of database environments, because it's fairly lightweight in terms of its size and how it can be orchestrated and automated in terms of deployment. It makes it very developer friendly, and it can be run on a laptop very easily. Again, it helps developers get to use it. So there are countless open source projects as well as paid products that companies and individuals create to support developers who wish to use Postgres, helping it make it a more developer-friendly database to use. So Postgres also supports JSON as well as ANSI SQL standards and data. So we say this is a natural fit, the best of both worlds, meaning that you've got that NoSQL, that JavaScript object notational data that you can use for your NoSQL workloads, which is great for machine parsing and generation. You've got HStore as well, which is the key value extension, which allows you to work with additional NoSQL workloads for key value pair data. And the great thing about having this in Postgres is that you can also take advantage of the traditional technologies within Postgres, such as ACID compliance, which is a standard feature for transactional SQL relational database. So many NoSQL databases don't actually have that technology in place, or it's more of an afterthought. Obviously, with Postgres, it's a fundamental of the relational database, and that can be used against supporting your NoSQL workloads as well as your traditional workloads. Postgres also supports JSON-B, so this is the binary format of JSON data. And this can be fully integrated into the same transactional context, meaning you can benefit from ACID compliance for your workloads. This also allows you to utilize many indexes that are available within Postgres, such as GIN and B-tree listed here. And this can mean that you actually provide better performance for certain workloads than some specific NoSQL databases in a variety of use cases. And if you're interested in finding out more about that, we've got some documentation on the EDB blog, on our EDB website, that goes into detail about some of the case studies that we've done and benchmarked. PostGIS. This is a spatial extension. So it's a fully open source project, community project, and it's fully supported by EDB. So if you're looking to develop applications using spatial data, PostGIS should provide you with all the technology you need in the areas of distance, area, point-to-point coordination in terms of handling your data in a spatial context. So it's a great extension to Postgres, enabling spatial data functionality and modeling. So in terms of looking at one of our penultimate case studies, so this was an international insurance company who restructured their reporting function using Postgres. So they had basically building a new data warehouse system, choosing to use Postgres for the fact that it can integrate very well with other technologies, whether that be ETL tools or reading data directly from other data sources. They had poor performance issues originally, and they were facing scalability challenges. So their requirement for, or increasing the requirement for building and doing increased reporting workloads was a challenge for what they were currently working with. So obviously EDB's helped them meet their performance requirements, and were able to integrate Postgres into their existing architecture and the technology they were using. So ultimately, the business have got a platform that is needed to deliver insights and business intelligence, and meeting the SLAs, running those reports in a timely manner that's suitable for the customers. This was deployed on the customer's private cloud environment. So again, we can support a variety of environments. Okay, moving on to security. As we mentioned, Postgres as a standard open source product is a very secure database out of the box. What EDB tend to do is we add extra features where we see our enterprise customers requiring certain features. So looking at the slide here, and we'll talk about the security features, we have added many additional features, and some of these have come from Oracle customers requesting or requiring an alternative to what they're used to working with in Oracle in Postgres, and perhaps that didn't exist in Postgres, so EDB have helped build that technology in. So we've got things like data redaction, additional logging and session tag auditing, password policy management. This is an Oracle feature that we've implemented in EDB. We have procedural language code obfuscation, which means if you've got sensitive business logic inside your database, and you want to keep this away from prying eyes, if you're sharing your schema, for example, with somebody, and you don't want to look at the source code, you can encrypt or wrap that code so it's prevented from being viewed. And also we have SQL injection protection. And think of this as like a firewall at the SQL level on the database. So If you've got a reporting database, for example, and somebody runs a delete statement, being mischievous, the idea of this product is it's supposed to stop and prevent those unwanted SQL commands being run against your data. So therefore adding an extra layer of protection. Advanced Server also adds a bunch of other features, as you can see on the slide. Oracle compatibility probably being the main feature that Advanced Server is known for. But as well as the security, we also add productivity features that assist DBAs and developers, as well as adding performance features that typically are required by enterprises who we work with. Some of these features, as I've mentioned previously, have gone into the community Postgres, but other features do remain as part of an Advanced Server only version. Every version of Advanced Server is built from community Postgres, and then we just add features on top. So we consider it a superset of Postgres community. So ultimately, security enhancements you can get using EDB's Advanced Server. The password policy management, like I said, you can add extra auditing for meeting compliance standards. So again, this is useful for if you're having to operate or work in a banking environment or a government environment where security standards or compliance standards have to be met. We've got the code protection for your business logic that you may have written inside the database. Data redaction, again, this is to mask or hide the data, sensitive data from people who shouldn't be looking at it. And a variety of other security tools that we'll add to improve on the overall experience of what is already a secure open source database. So moving on to EDB cloud offerings. So this is a high level of what EDB provides as a company. So we've got it in three separate tiers. We have a software level, a support level, and a services level. The software is simply Postgres Community, what we call our standard edition, Advanced Server, which is Enterprise Edition. We then have enterprise tooling that works against both versions of the database, depending on what you choose. You also get technical support included as part of the subscription with regard to how you pay for EDB. Further support, additional costs, includes things like the Cloud DBA service, which I've mentioned before, remote DBA, which is essentially doing the same DBA service, but on on-premise servers instead of the cloud. And we have technical account manager service as well. If you're looking to do many projects with EDB, we can help project manage and guide you through a process of maybe migration, Postgres adoption, and various projects you may be engaging with using Postgres as a database technology. And we also offer a variety of professional services that are tailored for particular use cases or maybe steps along your journey of Postgres adoption. So we categorize these into getting started. For example, if you're just starting off with a project with Postgres, they're the courses tailored for that. Postgres optimization, maybe you already have Postgres in some implementations, but perhaps you're not getting the best out of it. Maybe it's an old version that you're using and the performance is bad, or you need some help DBAing the system. We can help you using the experience that EDB have had the last 16 years working with this technology to improve the performance of what you have in place, as well as set up things like monitoring and backup best practice. And if you're looking at adopting Postgres as a strategic move, then we have professional services engagements to provide thought leadership, vision, direction about how we recommend or based on customers we worked with in the past, how we've helped customers adopt to use Postgres as a technology, as a strategic replacement for maybe something like Oracle or SQL Server, or generally just if they're looking to deploy new applications on an open source based platform. So we also provide custom services. So if there's a variety of things that are appealing, we can provide a custom service engagement made up of many of those, as well as subject matter experts. We provide training. So if you need to get your DBAs or staff trained up with Postgres, we provide training and certification around Postgres and EDB Postgres. So really it's a full suite of anything you think of Postgres, EDB's got that covered. So with regard to the Cloud DBA service, this is mainly designed to be proactive around monitoring, tuning, upgrading, patching, just basically keeping an eye on your databases on a daily basis, and not being a reactive service, but definitely a proactive service, using tools that you can outsource the DBA service to us to monitor your database in the cloud. And we can do this service against databases that you've installed on compute servers, so like EC2 on AWS, for example, or if you're using a database as a service offering from a vendor. Obviously, depending on what type of service you have purchased, it sometimes can restrict the amount of work we can do against that in terms of having full control over that service or database. But obviously, we can keep an eye on how things are running for you and tune and help you with upgrades and understand the workloads and your general requirements. So again, this means that you've got the expertise based on EDB's expertise that can help you set up and run your databases for the workloads that you want. You don't have any lock-in, so again, don't be afraid to install a service on one cloud vendor or on-prem or a variety of different offerings. We can help support you on those. And we've got that 24/7 or 24/7 monitoring of your databases, done by globally distributed teams. So again, you shouldn't be afraid of outsourcing your database services to us. As I mentioned before, also database as a service for advanced server is in place on a couple of cloud vendors. Obviously, IBM Cloud mentioned here, as well as Alibaba Cloud, who do a separate offering, which is fundamentally using advanced server as the back-end database. So again, this provides you with a pay-as-you-go model. You can scale up and scale down, deploy instances at the click of a button and when you want them. And the cloud vendors provide high availability alerting and backups as part of the service. So yeah, it's a fully inclusive tooling service built around EDB Advanced Server. Okay, so the final subject today was talk about, again, the migration or the final use case of moving away from incumbent or legacy databases. So we call it break free from Oracle. So why are clients looking at moving away from Oracle? And typically it falls into these three categories. Price, that's the obvious one. Oracle's typically an expensive database to license and usually fairly inflexible in terms of how and what you license. So that is off-putting to many customers. And we've come across many customers, and I have personally over the years, who are looking to not only cost contain their expenditure on Oracle, but also look to wholeheartedly replace Oracle as a technology in their enterprise. So many features in the database come at extra cost. These could be tools that you use with Oracle, or even database features, within the database itself. When you enable certain features, you get charged more for them, and obviously that's painful in terms of licensing and understanding how to license and what you need to license. Many other companies are looking to have an open source strategy as well. So not just the pain point because of Oracle, but they're looking forward to an open source strategy. So I've personally worked with customers who have Oracle incumbent and are happy to continue with it, but they're also looking to develop new applications on an open source platform. So they wanted to have the choice when they come to build a new application. Do I need additional features in Oracle, or are we perfectly happy running it on an open source based platform? So again, this enables not only the deployment of new applications, but also the existing workloads that may be running on Oracle. I think Gartner mentioned that over 70% or 80% actually of workloads, existing workloads, are perfectly suitable for open source databases. So there's a massive amount of workload out there that can fit very well with an open source database like Postgres. And 70% of new applications developed will be developed on open source databases. So this strategic move is often as part of a data modernization play within an organization, helps companies take control of their licensing, helps increase innovation, and obviously helps reduce the lock-in risks, which is another headache that people get using traditional databases like Oracle. The final thing is around cloud and replatforming. Now, when looking to move workloads to the cloud, there can be some issues with regard to cost and ease of use on particular cloud vendors. Obviously, if you're looking to move workloads to the cloud and you're considering replatforming to a OpEx model, as I said before, database is often a consideration as part of that move or replatforming. So, this is often coupled with open source strategic move when you're moving workloads outside your prem or off-prem into a cloud environment. And you're not alone. So again, these are the top reasons we see or we come across why people choose to leave Oracle for Postgres. Firstly, the obvious cost savings. We're talking usually 80% cheaper 90% list price by list price comparison for typical enterprise environments. Obviously, Oracle have ULAs in place for a variety of customers. Your discounts you may be getting with them may be more favourable, but still we can offer considerable discounts on the cost you're paying for Oracle with an open source based database. And this means you can avoid vendor lock-in. So you're not tied to a particular database, you're not tied to a particular infrastructure or even a particular cloud vendor. You've got the flexibility to deploy on what platform you want without facing extra penalty for choosing a particular virtualization technology, for example. You've got freedom of choice to deploy where you want, and it's an easy to understand licensing model with EDB and Postgres. It's easy to re-platform to cloud and hybrid. So again, we've discussed this already. This is part of the deployment using cloud services and being able to choose more flexibly where and how you deploy. Innovation to open source is definitely something which is a key reason. People like the fact that the open source community can turn around fixes very quickly. They can add new features very quickly. They're transparent with issues that arise in the code. Any bug that is or security critical issue that is raised in the community is made public. So nothing is hidden in terms of trying to hide sensitive information about the database. Everything is hidden and everything is fixed as soon as possible to make sure that you can trust the people that are developing this product. So ultimately, you get a smoother path towards a long-term goal of digital transformation, which may be that your end game of trying to reduce your overall cost, trying to make your development of new applications more agile, more cost-effective, quicker, and ultimately becoming more competitive in the market. Improving your time to market, and increasing the value that you can provide to your customers. So we discussed the Oracle migration. Why choose EDB for helping you with an Oracle migration? So we've conducted over 300 successful migration projects with customers, and these projects consist of multiple Oracle database migrations, and we're doing this on a daily basis, migrating Oracle databases, and we're talking to customers on a daily basis about exactly this point. So why EDB? First thing is we have that deep compatibility with the Oracle database. That compatibility layer includes a variety of useful tools. The database looks and feels a little bit like Oracle, so again, it helps DBAs make the transition across, working with a new database technology. We can port much of and run natively much of the code from your Oracle database, the schema objects, directly on EDB Postgres. So again, it de-risks that migration and helps speed up the transition away from the Oracle platform, especially compared if you're looking to migrate to pure open source Postgres or any other database platform. You don't have to rewrite those stored procedures anywhere near the same degree as you would if you were moving to a different database, for example. So it's probably the easiest path or the quickest path away from Oracle than comparing with any other platform. So we have comprehensive migration tools and services. So EDB provide a variety of tools to help assess your Oracle workloads and also do the actual migration. So if you've got a situation where you could have downtime, great, we can help you with tooling specific for that. If you've got applications that can't have any downtime, again, we have tooling that can be used to do change data capture and replicate data from an online Oracle system. So you kind of run systems in parallel. There's a variety of tools that we can use and have used to help clients migrate. And ultimately, you've got the support of EDB to provide you that 24/7 technical support, level 1 to level 3 technical support for any Postgres deployment you may have, whether that's community Postgres or EDB's advanced server, at any scale you wish to run. So if it's from a simple system to a mission critical core banking system, for example, we can support you and have customers that are benefiting from EDB support. In terms of our compatibility, we have a lot of compatibility with Oracle. I will not say we have everything that Oracle has, that would be an absolute lie, but there is a lot of compatibility that EDB provide that typically looks at the majority of functions and packages that our customers are using. And if a customer is using a particular feature or function that isn't supported, we can add that into the code for Advanced Server to help them with the migration. Other solution providers tend to do migration of part of the schema, typically the tables, the rows, data in the rows, and some of the schema objects. But then there's usually a large amount of store procedures, triggers, functions that will not come across, and they have to be re-engineered. So they only really get you part way through a migration. EDB is designed to do everything in terms of migrating. And one of the steps we take before doing any migration is to assess your existing installation and give you an overview in terms of a report, how likely that database or how good a candidate that database is for migration. So we'll be clear and concise with the upfront before doing any migration work to let you make the decision if you want to go ahead with the migration. But because of our compatibility, it helps reduce the risk and time taken to do an Oracle migration. And this can sometimes be up to 70%, 75% of the actual migration cost is involved in rewriting or having to rewrite store procedures that we don't have to because we can natively run that code on EDB Postgres. So this is typically the migration process we do and have done. So we have a migration portal on the EDB website that you can use yourself to test the compatibility for a particular Oracle system that you may have. So that's a self-service portal that is really easy to use, really easy to follow. And you simply upload a Oracle schema to that portal, click an assessment button, and you'll get results within minutes of how compatible that database looks. If it looks good to you and you want to continue the discussion with us, we then go through what we call a migration discovery. So this is working with you and your organization to work out if you're looking at migrating dozens of databases or a whole estate of Oracle, for example, we can work with you to identify what are the best use cases or best fits for migrating to EDB. We can then go to the next stage, which is migration assessment. This is running a professional services engagement that looks at a deep dive level into your databases, and it finds any issues that they may have in terms of compatibility. If we have to find a workaround in Postgres or use an alternative function, for example, that exists in Postgres, or if there's things that are missing that we need to implement in our product. This is designed, like I said, to be clear and concise for the customer so they're aware of what's involved in terms of complexity or ease of migration. It can be both for a particular system. We then go through a solution workshop. So again, if you're looking at migrating multiple databases or schemas, this is a solution workshop to explain and review the assessment report and basically to help plan and roadmap the migration process and the ultimate, your destination, what it's going to look like. And finally, we get on with the migration and achieve success. We never walk into a migration knowing or without having the understanding if we can do it, yes or no. We won't try migration, then 3 months later turn around and say, oh, we've come across a problem and it's a showstopper. That's the whole part of the migration assessment. We identify that early on so we don't waste your time and we don't waste our time trying to do something we can't. So this final case study is a great example of where we're doing this process and having lots of this particular pharmaceutical company is really benefiting from many of the services that I've mentioned previously on our EDB offerings. So they have an ambition or initiative to basically have a complete replacement of Oracle. So they want to get rid of everything Oracle that they can. And this involves hundreds of databases being migrated to Postgres. So again, it's not only small databases, it's mission critical databases too, with the overall ambition to reduce database cost and expenditure and ultimately move on to an open source platform. So they don't want the vendor lock-in. They want the Oracle compatibility because they don't want to have to rewrite all their applications or rewrite all their database code. They want enterprise class support, and they want an economic licensing model that is provided by open source and by EDB Postgres. So, you know, the benefits that this business have gained, you know, we're helping them move and meet their open source strategic requirement. It adds flexibility to the business in terms of how they deploy applications, how they build new applications. You know, maybe the money they've saved from Oracle, they can reinvest in new hardware, new technologies, such as containers, for example. You know, there's multiple ways of looking at how that saving from Oracle can be reinvested in different areas to help drive the business forward in a positive way. So this particular customer have taken advantage of various things that EDB provide. So EDB's advanced services, advanced server database for the Oracle compatibility, obviously. They're using a technical account manager because they're embarking on multiple migration projects. And they're using EDB professional services to help them with that migration path, help them understand the adoption, where they can go, how best to use Postgres, how we can set up mission critical architectures, database as a service, those sort of things. And they can deploy on a variety of platforms. So right now they're using virtualization technology on premises on a private cloud, but they have future ambitions to move to Kubernetes. And many customers that I'm talking to these days are looking to deploy Postgres in a container form, where typically it's not been considered running database workloads as a default choice, but times are changing. So that concludes the talk for today. So recommended next steps that I would suggest, obviously, if you want to learn more about application modernization using Postgres and how EDB can help with that, or if you're looking at adopting Postgres as part of a strategic open source adoption, we have that plan to do so in your enterprise, then feel free to reach out to either EDB or IBM, obviously, to engage in some conversations with us. So I thank you very much for listening today, and please feel free to have a look on enterprisedb.com to learn more about what we do as a company, how we're working with IBM, and some of those blogs that I've mentioned previously and white papers are fully documented and available to you to read from the EDB website. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rob, for this insightful presentation. Looks like we do not have any questions today, so this takes us to the end of the session. Thanks everyone for joining us for this webinar. We will be sharing the recording along with the slides with you as soon as possible. I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you and see you next time. Bye.